तदर्थं तेषां लिखितकरणं प्रददातुम् अहं वंशी कुमार महोदयं प्रार्थयामि।
नमस्सभायै अधिपञ्चं विराजमानान् सर्वान् विद्वज्जनान् नमस्कृत्य इदानीम् अत्र विराजन्ते मार्ति नारायण शर्मा महाभागाः इमे पञ्चाङ्गकर्तारः भवन्ति विजयवाडातः चैत्रपक्षज्ञानमिति यदि वयं वदामः तदनुसृत्य एते पञ्चाङ्गनिर्माणं कुर्वन्ति। एवमेव 14 देशानामपि इतर पाश्चात्यदेशानामपि तत्र पञ्चाङ्गनिर्माणम् इत्यादिकमपि ते कुर्वन्तः सन्ति। अनन्तरं वैदिकमार्गेणापि तत्र स्मार्ताध्ययनम् इत्यादिकं वेदाध्ययनं सर्वमपि कृत्वा अमेरिकादेशे ते एते उद्योगे आसन्, किन्तु अत्र किञ्चित् सिद्धान्तज्योतिषे रिसर्च् इत्यादिकं कर्तव्यमिति कारणात् पुनः अत्रैव आगत्य इदानीं विजयवाडामध्ये एव वसन्ति। पञ्चाङ्गमपि प्रतिवर्षं प्रकाशयन्ति। एतान् अहम् अनुरुन्धे स्वविषयं तत्र ग्रहयुद्धम् इति मन्ये, ग्रहयुद्धविषये इति मन्ये, तान् तद्विषयम् उपस्थापयन्तु इति।
Namaha. Salutations to all. So my presentation is going to be in English, so please bear with me. And the topic which I'm going to discuss is the planetary war and lunar occultations, and how we can apply in forecasting major social events which we cannot foresee with just regular planetary combination or the conjunction of regular planets. So what is planetary war? So most of our Samhita Granthas, they describe going on to tell about Graha Yuddham and how it's going to happen, and what are the different types of planetary war, and what are the types of impact which it can give to the social events, and how frequent do they happen. All those we're going to look with the example as well. So I'm not going to read the verses, but you can find them in Brihat Samhita in 17th chapter, Graha Yuddha Adhyayam. So they say that though the planets tend to revolve with a lot of space or distance between each other, for the eye point of view, which we see from the geocentric or the topocentric point of view, they seem to collide with each other, or they seem to go next to each other, which of course doesn't really happen practically. So the first one is the top view. The top view, we can see that the solar system, the planets are all very distant apart. But if we see the side view, how we see from the Earth as a being, for our eye, they tend to connect with each other or meet. So that we tend to call it as Graha Yuddham. And depending on the closeness, how close do these planets approach to each other, there are 4 types. Bhedana means it's a complete occultation. It's a complete occultation where the planets, the center of the disk of each of the planets exactly meet with each other. Ullekha means it's like a partial cut, like Pakshika Chandra Grahanam, Pakshika Surya Grahanam Asti, right? So like that, the partial cut of the planet takes place in Ullekha. Amsumardhanam, only the clashing of the rays, or like they come very close to each other, like they might touch, or like a distance apart with like 1 arc minute. And Apasavyam means they are like at least 10 arc minutes distant with each other, or one might be retrograde and traveling in the opposite direction. So these are the 4 types of Graha Yuddham or planetary conflicts which we can see in Brihat Samhita. So this is with a practical example, like a pictorial view, how they tend to look of the planets in overlapping with each other. And in Apasavyam, they are like almost close, but they never touch. This is like an example in 2020, around December, we had the great conjunction of Jupiter. From the top view, you can see that they're both very distant apart, but from the side view, we can see that they're almost like 6 minutes close. It's like a pretty rare social event, which rarely happens. On 21st December 2020, they're like only 6 arc minutes close. And for this to really happen, we have to get into the Siddhanta Bhagam, like the calculation part, like how much the disk width is there, what's the diameter of the disk of each planet, and also the inclination of the orbits. Because based on the inclination, we can predict whether the latitude is going to be the same, the serum of both the planets is going to be equal or not, so whether they're going to intersect, there's a conflict or not. In the first picture, there's the orbital inclination of each of the planets, where Mercury has the largest, like up to 7 degrees, and Jupiter having the lowest, like 1 degree and 18 minutes. And in the second table, you can find that the angular diameter of each of the planets. The moon having up to 30 minutes of the disk diameter. And whereas the Kujadi Panchagrahas, the Mars to Saturn, they have very minute, it's like less than an arc minute. So in order for them to intersect each other, or for a planetary war to happen, the maximum distance permissible is only up to an arc minute. And though a planetary war takes place, in what condition it might not be valid, or in what condition it has to be valid, has been taken into account in Brihat Samhita. And he says that if the planet is growing bright, and if it is in forward motion, it might not be taken into account. But if it is in retrograde, or if the magnitude or the brightness of the planet is affected, then definitely we should take into place the Graha Yuddha and predict the results. And these are the effects of the 4 types, what kind of predictions we can give. So during the Veda occultation, we can predict that there is going to be a severe drought or water shortage or some any disagreement between the governments or the political leaders, and a war-like situations might happen. And even in Ullekana, Amsumardana, and Apasavya also, we have different types of results which we can predict based on the closeness of the 2 planets. So how frequent does this happen? In order to take into account, if we just have rough calculations of the planetary diameters and the time of intersecting of those longitudes, for the Veda and Ullekana to happen, might happen only once a couple centuries. Like, it's not a very frequent thing. Once every 100 or 200 years we can see that, because they have to come to a very close proximity. But Amsumardana and Apasavya, they can happen like once every couple decades, because the maximum distance can be from 1 minute to 10 minutes in angular diameter. And if we observe in the past 2 centuries or in the upcoming century, only in the 19th century we did have some planetary wars. The 20th century we don't see any planetary wars going on. It's like some kind of magic or something. But in the 21st century, in 2065, we have a Venus transiting Jupiter. So in the braces, I've given that 10 seconds is the disk diameter of Venus, 29 seconds is the disk diameter of Jupiter. And they come into a very close proximity of 14 seconds, so their disks overlap with each other. And it's going to happen in 2065. Till then, we don't have a perfect Veda condition. So, though the text describes so many social events or so many ways to predict, obviously we have to apply it practically somewhere to prove that this is really valid and we can still apply it in today's age. So this is just an incident which I took as an example. So in 1965, we all know that the Indo-Pakistan War has happened, right? And it happened between 5th August to 23rd September. But if we look at the transit period during that time, it's pretty difficult to predict whether the war is going to likely happen or not based on just the Rasi chart. We can't exactly say which planet is causing the effect to take place. But if we observe Bharata, the Indian country, it's in the Paura situation, like we didn't initiate the war. Pakistan is in the Yayi condition. They initiated the war. They tried to cross the LOC with a secret operation that I mentioned, Operation Gibraltar. So they tried to cross the LOC. So if we think of like forecasting this event with the Graha Yuddha point of view, we can see that on 4th of July, it's like a month prior to the actual placement of war, on the 4th of July 1965, there was a conjunction of Venus and Mercury on Sunday. But Venus was passing 2 minutes and 28 seconds to the north of Mercury, which means that Mercury was defeated by Venus. So for that, we can see Bhruvana Jitegnikopaha Sasyam Budayayi Vidhvamsaha. It's taken from Brihat Samhita, 17th chapter, 17th verse, which means if Mercury is defeated by Venus, it says that fires will break out, there's a crop loss or reduce in the rain, and also the marching kings will be ruined. Means the Yayi, whoever is trying to initiate the war, they will be ruined. And we have seen the outcome of the war, that India won the war and Pakistan lost it. We have all witnessed that. And the Indus and Himalayas, they belong to Buddha, and the Takshasila, Gandhara, and ministers, they all belong to Venus. Like, so we were able to diplomatically overcome the war. And the next one is lunar occultations. Like, Graha Yuddha is a concept which we can use only for Kujati Panchagrahas. But if we take the consideration of moon into picture, if we cannot call it as a Graha Yuddha, but we have to call it as Samagamam. So in English we say it as lunar occultations, where since moon is the near planet to us, we always see moon in the front and all the planets in the back. So moon just overcrosses all the planets. So we're going to have an overview of how it actually works. So lunar occultation is when moon moves in front of a planet. Here I've taken Mars as an example. So moon, if it is going to the north of a planet, And in the second case, it goes to the exact center where the Bhedana happens. The Chandramandala Bhedana means the planet is cutting exactly the center of the diameter of the moon. And in the third case, it's the southward transit of the moon for the planet, like moon going to the south of Mars or south of Saturn. So considering these situations, we take into account what are the implications, what type of impact it might have. The Brihat Samhita in the Chandrachara Adhyayam, there is a very, very detailed explanation of each of the planets, what are the type of implications or effects which they give if the moon's disk is being cut by the planets. And then also Gargada Jyotisham, we can find the results of if the moon is traveling southwards to Mars or Jupiter or Saturn, like Chandra Yada Dakshina Margagami. The upper one is an exact Bheda. The lower sloka is moon traveling to the south of the planet. So this is just a tabular format of the concise results because the slokas, they're like very huge in number. I've just given a brief translation of, so if in the first case, if we consider the impact of occultation means the perfect Chandramandala Bhedanam, if it is done by Mars, Kuja, then kings who are ready for war with cavalry, they will be affected, and chieftains and important kings, they suffer for up to 6 months. So if we could note this event, we can predict that in the upcoming 6 months, some disaster might happen, some natural calamity might happen, or the political situation might be different, and how it's going to impact the global market. And if moon travels to the south of Mars, the kings are troubled by enemies, so the enemies might plan a secret attack, an unprepared battle might take place. So that's how the results will be for the upcoming 5 planets. And the frequency of occurrence. As we discussed in the planetary war situation, the diameter of the moon disk is up to 30 minutes. So in case of any planet to travel to the center of the disk of moon, the maximum separation should be only up to 17 arc minutes. But if it has to go to the exact center, it should be only 1 arc minute because the planet's maximum diameter is only up to a minute. It cannot be more than a minute for any planet. So for the occultation of the center of disk, like Chandramandala Bhedanam, it occurs only a few times in a couple of decades. Like for every 20, 30 years or so, we can only see one incidence of it happening. But for the occultation, for the north or south of the planet, like moon traveling to the south of Jupiter or the north of Saturn, they happen a few times every several years, so we can note it down more frequently. And so this is a practical application, just like I said, though we do have many verses stating many things, we should try to see how far it goes practically in experience, right? So Lal Bahadur Shastri, as many of you know, is the second Prime Minister of India. So he was passed away in Uzbekistan, Tashkent, on 11 January 1966. It's kind of like a mysterious death. And even if we, like many people try to file for the RTI, right to information, but it was still not revealed to the public. So it is considered as a mysterious death. But if we look at the planetary combination during the passing of his time, it's pretty difficult to predict why did it happen. Like the Guru is in retrograde with Rahu, did he cause it? Or Mars and Venus in Makaram, did they cause it? It's pretty difficult. But if we take the moon and the planets into account and try to predict it, on 28 October 1965, it was like 2 months prior to the incident, the moon was passing 38 seconds to the south of Mars. So as we have discussed, if moon is being occulted, like Chandramandala Bhedam by Kuja or moon traveling to the south of Mars, so we can say that important kings suffer in the coming 6 months. So within 3 months of this natural incident taking place, our Prime Minister was gone in a mysterious condition. And since it is to the south of Mars, we can easily say that kings are being troubled. So if we note such events, we can easily predict what might come up in the near future. And the second example is Indira Gandhi, the third Prime Minister. She was assassinated by her own bodyguards. But if we look at the planetary combination on the day of her assassination, the 31st October, the planetary combination is pretty difficult to predict that such event is likely to occur. It might not even pop up to our imagination that such incidences might take place in our country. But if we look at that year, in 1984, so since March 21st till October 1st, before she was assassinated, like the moon was traveling to the south of Saturn for 5 times. And if we know that July 7th, it was passing like 8 minutes to the south of Saturn. It's a pretty rare event. Moon passing to the south of a planet, it pretty rarely occurs in a couple decades. And moon is passing to the south of Mars 2 times. So if we had this analysis, then we can foresee that something bad is going to happen. We have to be prepared. We have to increase our security or defense or intelligence. So we might have to take some precautions to avoid these incidents. And third example is Rajiv Gandhi. He was also assassinated on 1991 by LTTE suicide bomber. I think everybody is aware of that. And just like before also, the planetary combination is difficult to interpret. But if we take into account the Chandramandala Bhedana or moon traveling to the south of planets, then on that year we can see that on September 15th, the moon is traveling 16 minutes to the south of Jupiter. And also moon was passing 14 minutes to the south of Saturn in the same year, December. So it's almost like 6 months to 8 months before the incident. And the impact was, since it's being occulted by Jupiter, the Gandhara, Sindhu, Crops Mountains, and King of Dravida origin suffered. This is a very interesting point to note, that moon is traveling to the south of Jupiter. The clear mention of Dravida, so it gives us information to predict that since Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka, we can club under the Dravida region. So we can foresee that something bad might happen in that region. And since moon is traveling to the south of Saturn, the soldiers, ministers, and rulers of eastern countries, since India belongs to an eastern country, major difficulties might come up in the next 10 minutes. So if we take such planetary events into consideration, our forecasting will be a little more accurate to predict than just based on the planetary transits. That's the whole point of this presentation. And thank you. That's all for now. And the references are Bruhat Samhita and Swiss ephemeris, and I used inthesky.org to easily locate when these instances take place. Thanks.